Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump Recruitment discussion. In this series, we've been looking at the potential of recession, which is simply part of an economic cycle. And just like taxes, they just seem to happen. So today we're going to be discussing, you are following your 3-year business plan and recession happens. Do you change your plan? So I've started to do sort of research on recession and what sort of happens in recession. And there's a really good Harvard Business Review article called Roaming Out of Recession that found during the recessions of the 80s, 90s and 2000 that 17% of the 4,700 public companies that they studied either went bankrupt, went private or were acquired. But a striking number, 9% of companies simply didn't recover. They absolutely flourished during the big downturns. They outperformed their competitors by at least 10% on both sales and profit growth. And more recently, Bain used similar data from the Great Recession that reinforced that finding that top 10% of companies in the Bain analysis saw an earnings climb steadily through a period of recession. And a third study by McKinsey's found similar results. The big difference that they all noted was preparation. Among the companies that stagnated in the aftermath of the Great Recession, a few were the fact that they had no contingency plans and they had no alternative scenarios to actually fall back on. And when recession hit or downturn hit, they switched to survival mode, made deep cuts, and reacted very defensively. So many companies merely limped through their recession and it was a very slow recovery. Some layoffs are obviously inevitable during downturns, okay? But during the Great Recession, however, companies that emerged from the crisis in a stronger shape laid less people off, cut less costs, and looked to do operational improvement and understood their client base more. So the question is, do you understand what you need to improve and who are the clients that are likely to help you come through recession? Companies that considered reduction in hours, furlough, and reduced pay performance, again, after the stock market crash in 2000, found they had a really hard time recovering. And people like Honeywell, who laid off 20% of its workforce, struggled so much that they almost went under when coming back out from recession. A 2008 paper, or 18 paper, compared 100 million online job listings between 2007 and 2015, and used that economic data to see how the Great Recession affected the types of skills that employers were looking for. And they found that the hardest hit cities and the hardest hit countries saw greater demand in high order skills. So if you're in a high order skill area, then you can start to sort of think what you're doing. But companies who were only being choosy actually found themselves in a real problem. But companies that became more digital in those hard hit areas increased their investment in information technology to streamline their business, streamline their processes, make them faster, more cost effective, and more efficient, found that they came out of recession far quicker than anybody else. So the question is, are you sticking to your plan or are you hiding? So this week, Paul and Dave are back. Lovely Heather is on the client site in Leeds, and I'm dropping down there in a couple of hours' time as well to another client in Leeds. So the questions are, guys, welcome today. The questions are this: when economic cycles change, economics, and they will change, why is working your plan critical to success?
Okay, well, Dave Pye's done as usual. He's gone very quiet. So I'm going to have to sit in here because I could tell he wanted me to lead this one. So I will start this. Sorry, Mr. Pye.
I don't think it would have mattered what I wanted.
I think that is correct.
Hang on. So I think the thing here, and you've used the phrase having a plan. I think the point here is having a plan is everything. You know, having a form of direction for your business, and having everybody in the business understand the plan and buy into the vision, the goals of the business is critical. Going into any kind of economic cycle, whether it's boom time or it's potentially a recessionary climate, you have to have a plan. And it isn't just the question of having this plan stuck in the drawer in your desk to be dusted down once every 12 months. This is something that's a living thing that you are consistently discussing with the people around you, getting buy-in, getting their thoughts, getting their involvement, and driving towards to hitting the goals and the targets that you've set for yourself. So, is it important to have a plan going into a potential economic decline? Absolutely. And you could argue even more strongly that having a plan going into the type of economy that we're currently facing is perhaps even more important than during a boom time. There are people that would agree on this point that, when we're having an economic boom, making money in recruitment isn't that difficult, but you definitely need a very strong plan going into something that is likely to be more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Paul. I remember a bit like H, actually, one of my favourite things is going to the lakes. And I remember walking around Wastwater with our Ordnance Survey map, and the weather closed in, and it all got rather bleak, and we all got a little bit scared, even though we were quite low level rather than high level. But, the thing that we didn't do was then put away our Ordnance Survey map. We weren't really using it. We weren't paying a great deal of attention to it because we thought we knew where we were going. But then the turbulence came, then the weather came, then the wind and the rain came. Well, we didn't then decide, that's the time we need to put away the Ordnance Survey map, put it into our backpack and keep walking. That was the time we needed to go back and say, actually, where are we on this map? I know we know where we think we are, but where are we really? And where is the nearest, very important, where's the nearest pub, or where's the nearest safe place to go as the weather turned? And it's exactly the same for us all when we're running our businesses. I'm always constantly amazed at how many companies don't really have a plan. They have an idea, and they have a thought, and they have some sort of process jotted down somewhere, but it's not really a plan. And therefore they haven't got anything to refer to. So if you have got a plan, refer to it, as Paul says, and see how fit for purpose it is. And if you haven't, call this number right now and we'll help you with all your plans.
It was interesting, Dave. I was going to use the analogy about a ship getting blown off course, and you use your plan to get yourself back on course to carry on sailing the way that you're going. And I think that sort of thing about having a plan and having a direction, because it's very easy to get blown off course and then think you're back on the right direction and get completely lost. And having a plan keeps you focused in the direction that you should be going, but also keeps you focused on the things that you should be doing. Because again, it's very easy once things change to either sort of hide and retreat a little bit rather than actually make forward steps and make positive motions going forward. And having that plan drives you to make that, and being accountable to that plan and have people to make you accountable to that plan, again, moves you forward. And I think that the bit is when an economic cycle changes, and they change constantly, it's having that rigor about your plan and having the foresight to say, right, we need to do something. And it was interesting reading the full article that a lot of the businesses that came out of it with their plan had been set way, way before the economic cycle. And then as they started to realize that was coming, they started to really work their plan even harder and tailor their plan to what was actually happening. So it takes courage to stick to a plan and develop it, especially when forces outside your control change the outlook. So what don't you change on your plan if economic change happens?
Well, look, I think, the number one thing, and I alluded to this point earlier, is all about people. I've just come off of a mentoring call with a client, and naturally, and this is consistent, the conversation was almost all about the people working for this particular individual, and the discussion around trying to find other good quality people to bring into the business. This is a fairly standard conversation about attraction and retention. And I think if you're going into a recessionary climate, particularly, one thing we are very aware of is that it becomes increasingly more difficult to find quality people to bring into your business. So the one thing you absolutely want to be doing and not changing is looking after your people. Your best shot of success during any period, whether it's an economic upturn or a downturn, is to look after your people. How would you always talk about look after your people? Because they look after you, and it's a very good expression. And it's particularly true when things get tough. So one thing you don't want to be doing is to disenfranchise your people. You need people that are going to be behind you. You need people that are prepared to run through walls for you. If we're going into a more difficult climate, and we've all been through COVID recently, we know what a difficult climate's like. It's very recent. We all have the scars from it. We've come out the other end, and the businesses that have succeeded during that period and survived and prospered, and the ones that have come out the other end and are doing extremely well, like many of our clients at the moment, have all been organizations that at the heart of their thinking was taking care of their good quality people, making sure they were incentivized correctly, that they felt valued, that they received good quality support, training, development, great career prospects, all of those good things. And for me, that's the number one priority as we move into this next phase. Make sure everybody's on board, make sure they're fully incentivized and they have clear direction. And never lose sight of the fact that if we look after, as you say, Howard, those great people, they will look after us, even during the bad times. So for me, the thing you do not change in your plan is how you look after your people.
And I think added to that, Paul, I think people is number one, absolutely. You also don't stop communicating. Because the thing is, people want to be led. And whilst as business leaders, sometimes we don't really know quite what's going on. We have without sounding too political, we have a most unusual government at the moment. And the country seems to be floating along, not really knowing what it's doing. We don't have leadership from the top. And yet we are leaders of our businesses. And our people are looking to us and saying, well, whatever's going on in the outside world, what's going on here? And I think our job as leaders, as responsible leaders, is to continue to communicate, almost over communicate about this is the destination, this is where we're going, this is why you matter to us, this is your role in it. And I'm going to just keep reminding you of that and listen to your feedback and tell you what's going on and arm them with information. Like Howard starts all these webinars with a bit of information and some data. Keep your people informed as to what's going on in the business. Yeah. You don't have to reveal every single aspect of profit and loss and all of that. That's up to you. I don't know how you choose to do that and share that with your people. But certainly they should know how the business is doing, where you're going, how you're going to get there, and whatever economic storms that we are going through. If we're not getting leadership from the very top of the country, at least we can get leadership from the top of the business.
Well, it's headless chicken stuff at the moment, isn't it, as far as leading the country is concerned?
I think on my shout on that, I think the way you look at that is you never change your end goal. You might have to change the direction you're going in to get to that end goal. And it always reminds me of when we come into recession of the Ernest Shackleton story. Everyone thought his goal was to get to the South Pole, and that was his end goal. But his actual ultimate goal was to get every person back safely. Mm-hmm. And he actually wrote I think it was in the Times when he was advertising for people, expedition to the South Pole, chance of returning minimal. So he was quite open about what was expecting. But when they actually froze on the Weddell Sea, and he changed their direction and said, right, we're going to get back to this is how we're going to get back, and this is what we're going to do, he got every person on that boat back alive and did all sorts of things. His leadership through that period was absolutely brilliant, and he took some really hard decisions, but his end goal was to get every person back alive, and that's what he actually achieved. And it's all about that communication. It's all about how you motivate people. It's all about giving them a focus. And if you think about what they did, dragging their boats across the ice to get to the edge of the Weddell Sea, and then going through the worst sea in the world to find a small island, and then 3 of them rowing to another island, walking across glaciers, etc., etc. It's a really, really all about communication and about delegation, because he delegated lots of things out to people. So I think when you stick to your plan, your end goal is absolutely the ultimate thing that you're trying to get to. You might have to change the route to get there. It might change your time scale to get there, but your end goal is the ultimate thing that you need to be looking at.
And Howard, Annette makes a great point here. She says on the chat box, as ever, communication is key. People hate feeling they're in the dark, especially in times of uncertainty. They need reassurances and honesty, and very well said in it. And we talk about security, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the very base of that pyramid is the need for security, to feel safe. And we went through this, as we mentioned a moment back, about COVID and how important it was to keep communicating to people to make them aware that we were going to get through these dark times, that we were going to get to the next level, things were going to improve. Well, we may need a little bit of that as we move into this next phase, into the winter period, which, by the way, I think most of us feel, if there are going to be any difficult or challenging times, are most likely to happen in January onwards rather than before Christmas. But I think that this point about keeping people secure is so important. We've been through worse. We don't quite know what's coming. We know we've got through worse and we've come out there very, very successfully. And all of my clients, not most, all of my clients are feeling very comfortable and confident that we'll navigate these choppy waters and come out the other end as well very successfully. But you've got to imbue that sense of security, make people feel comfortable as we go through those periods. And that, as you rightly say, Howard, is down to leadership. That level of communication is so important.
So as we talk about leadership, Paul, when economic change happens, leaders tend to do one of four things. They either do nothing, they go backwards, they accept the average, or they take massive action. Why is it important to take action now before the change in the economic cycle happens?
Well, look, go on, Dave, you first.
So I was going to say, I think it's interesting because sometimes actually the best response is not to take massive action. Because as we've all said, it's about trust, it's about communication, it's about the destination. And sometimes I think companies can do a kind of knee-jerk response to what's going on. Well, actually, a more calm and considered approach is what's needed. Because then your people are with you. They can see that you're not in any way panicking, but they can see that you're taking a measured approach. And if you are communicating with them, and if you are earning their trust and you're being open and honest with them, as we've already said, I think then the considered actions that you take, given what may be going on that could have applied to your sector or to your geography. You may be a contract supplier, but there's more perm. You may be a perm supplier, but there's more contract, and you have to shift one way or the other. They are more subtle shifts rather than major action points. Because I think sometimes there's a feeling, gosh, we've got to do something and we've got to do it now. And actually the something could just be a more considered approach to leadership and action rather than a knee-jerk urgency where something big happens. And I think over time that can stand a business in good stead.
I think you said that very well, Dave. Look, I think it's about anticipation. Leaders need to be looking ahead and trying to figure out what's likely to be coming around the corner, because if they don't, it's pretty certain not many others in the business will. Now, to some extent, you can be blindsided by a lot of the negativity in the press at the moment. I mean, I've told people the story recently. A couple of Sundays ago, I remember, came back from the London Marathon. My son was running in the marathon. I sat down to watch news at 10, and after 10, 15 minutes, I thought, I've just had too much bad news in this broadcast. I turned it off. I said to my wife, I can't watch any more of it. It's just too awful. Every bit of news is awful. So much media spin as well. It's so pessimistic. And I think if you were to believe everything you read in the press, then you can get yourself into a pretty bad state. Somewhere between the optimists and the pessimists will probably be where we're at. But nevertheless, taking everything into consideration, looking at the extremes and trying to figure out what we think is the likely outcome is very much a leader's role, trying to anticipate where we're going. To your point, avoiding knee-jerk reactions, avoiding knee-jerk reactions to some of the more negative news is important, trying to be measured, but also having a view that, in a way, and don't take this in the wrong way, planning for the worst and hoping for the best is possibly the right route. So not necessarily getting panic-stricken or overly optimistic and deluded, but somewhere in the middle and thinking, look, we'll kind of consider what could possibly happen and we'll plan for that. Now, for me, and to your point, Dave, this communication issue internally is vitally important, but let's not forget the way you'll know as a leader what is likely to be coming round the corner is to be very close to your client base.
Yeah.
Go, and I've been saying to people for months and months and months now, get tight to your clients, understand their sentiment, understand what they feel, how they are planning for 2023, not from a phone call perspective, but face to face consistently with them, getting tighter and closer to them as we start moving into this next period. That for me is extremely important, and that is allied to the point about communication with your own people. And it's that information and knowledge that will help you to navigate whatever's coming around towards us as we move into the winter.
It's interesting you talk about that, Paul, because I always think at this time of year, I always think about what next year looks like. So to me, Q4 in your calendar year is always about setting up Q1 of next year. Out, visit your clients, find out who's going to carry on recruiting, find out who's going to stop recruiting, find out who's going to increase their recruitment. Because if you start to sort of think about what generally happens in a business, according to McKinsey's, you lose 40% of your business every year. So you've got 40% that's got to be renewed. It's easier to get that out of your current client base than it is to go find new clients. But if you know what your shortfall is likely to be, and you know what your client's reaction is going to be to potential recession, then it's all about going out and saying, right, I need to find new clients. And that's the bit that is there. If you took that action now, and it's a positive action rather than the knee-jerk action that Dave's talking about, take that positive action and say, I need to find new clients that will complement my current client base, that will cover the potential loss. You're then playing that what if game. What if this client actually stops, but what if they don't? And if they don't and they carry on building, then all of a sudden you've counteracted that, you're going to build even more. So to me, it's always about looking at your clients and understanding what your clients are actually going to do. Whether they do that or not is a whole different story. But if you don't understand what your client base is doing, then again, you're going to be left a little bit in the wilderness, because you're at their whim rather than you taking charge. And how often do we say during the start of lockdown, do you understand what your clients are now going to do? How many clients carried on and building? How many clients stopped instantly? And that's the bit that people never got close to. And I think when we've got a recession, we've got a time period now before we actually start to move maybe into that marketplace to understand that. So we help lots of companies, and we do lots of 3-year plans with companies and develop them and work with them. In your experience, what's the most difficult thing to do when the economic cycle changes?
Yeah, I prefer economics, actually. I thought that was much better. I think stick to the plan. I see no reason with any of my clients to be downgrading where we want to be in the next 2-3 years, regardless of what's coming around the corner. I mean, no 3-year plan is cast in stone. You really don't know, but why change things that you have control over? I'm all for carrying on regardless, as I think that might have been a Kenneth Williams film, actually. But in any case, carrying on and keep on pushing in the right direction. What you do need to do, however, is consistently look at 3-month sort of sprints. What are we going to be doing in the next 3 months? So keep to the long-term plan for sure, but it requires some agility within that 3-year plan to consider what are the most important, most urgent, most strategic things we need to tackle over the next 13 weeks, and really be focused on achieving those things. Now, that isn't for me a long list. You don't end up, when you have those conversations, with 20 things that need to be done in the next 13 weeks. You bring it down to a handful of very urgent and strategically important issues, and you get those things done properly, rather than just touch them and skate over a number of different points. So yes, I think it's about maintaining your vision, not really, to be frank, diminishing it in any way, shape or form, but within the confines of that situation, be prepared on a 3-month basis to focus on certain elements to keep yourself moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Paul, isn't it? Because this kind of ties in with the last question, Howard, and the thing that you were saying. We need to stick to our plan. But at the moment, we are in a period, if you like, of economic turbulence. But as we've been saying for a number of weeks, as Neil said, Neil Carby from the RSC, who was on our webinar, we were at the Recruitment Expo last week, and the message that was coming from there is that whilst we're in an economic period of turbulence, from a demographic point of view, there are less people to go round. So as recruiters, we still have the upper hand because we know where the people are. We know how many of them there are, even if there are less than we would want. So our job is to go and educate our clients. So one way, to your point about winning new business, Howard, is going out and informing our clients that this is what's going on. Whilst there's turbulence in the economic market, in your sector, in your geography, with these skills at this time, this is what's happening in the market. And we're recruiters and we know that. So we should be getting our people at the desk to be speaking to their clients and telling them, actually, our plan at whatever the name of your company is to continue to provide you with these people. This is how we see the market developing over the next 90 days, over the next 18 months, whatever time frame you want to have, and remind your people that we, our companies, have a plan. This is how we're executing it. And we want to tell you, the clients, this is what we're doing about how we're going to service you, where we're going to get the people from, who's available, who's not, what the prices are, where the rates are going. And that famous quote that we heard last week, that there were 50% less people born in 1984 than in 1964. So whether we like it or not, there are less people for us to place, which means there are less people for our clients to buy. Well, they need to know that. And they're only going to know that if we tell them. And if we tell them, we're making a very warm new business call, rather than a cold call of, do you want any of these people, or have you got any vacancies? Yeah. It becomes a much more intelligent conversation. And that's a good thing for our plan.
So that's where that rigor comes in. I think the thing that lots of companies find difficult to do is to understand their figures and have the rigor around their figures. And lots of companies, when it starts, and I remember they're going through this in the early 2000s and in 2008 with my managers, that they would mask their figures to make them look like they were doing well, rather than actually what is the true economic measure, what the business needs to be doing. And once I brought a true economic measure in and said, this is how we're going to measure the business, I'm not bothered about that or this or that, that's how we measure the business, all of a sudden, it gave no one anywhere to hide. And because they had nowhere to hide, then they had to do the right things to bring their business back to where it should be and beyond. And we started to grow, and lots of our areas started to grow. Some areas suffered really badly in 2008 because of the massive loss of business from certain banks. But other parts of the business massively grew because they understood their financial data and what was actually happening in there, and that was then boning it back to the number of clients, number of jobs, etc., etc. And so we really went to town looking at that data and how we could then work on that. And we went back economically, like you were saying there, Dave, the difference between 63 and 84. But we look at now, I can't remember where I read this, but at the moment there's 1.3 million jobs. In 2008, before the recession, there was 800,000 jobs. When the recession hit, that went to 500,000 jobs. Now, if we only dropped by 300,000 jobs, we're still way above where we were in 2008. But your comment there about there are being less children born from 2000, and I think it was 2004 or 2008, and it stayed at that recession level, or that level, it hasn't really grown that much. It says we have a massive reduction in our population who can actually be employed. Put Brexit on top of that, that's where the problem is, and that's why there will be that uncoupling of recruitment as being the barometer of recession, because there'll be still that need for people or businesses to find people. So understanding your financial capabilities and your figures on how to generate that finance, to me, is the thing that most people find difficult, because we're in recession, we just do what we have to do. No, you still keep your rigor, you still keep your discipline on those figures, and I think that's the bit that we look at. And if we sort of move that on, we've all been through a number of economic changes and economic cycles. So what's the one thing that you implemented during the lowest part of an economic curve that made a huge difference on performance and coming out of that curve?
Well, I mean, just a quick point to the previous point before I answer that. Just an analogy. Heather and I talked briefly last week about watching our pensions kind of going south at the moment. But if you look at the performance of pensions over, say, a 10-year period, they tend to increase considerably. And the lesson to learn from from the pension situation is not to overreact when, for a period of time, things go in the wrong direction. Hold your nerve, in other words. Don't take your money out. Don't do anything daft. Hang in, because over a period of time, particularly over a 5-year, 10-year period, you'll see your money come back and increase in multiples. And you can apply that logic to the plans that we've just been talking about. Don't give up on your plans. Don't make rash decisions, knee-jerk decisions. Look further than just the next few months. Look further ahead. Look at it over a period of 3 to 5 years, because if you stick to your guns, you stick to your well-worked plans, then you'll tend to reap the rewards as time goes on. Don't make hasty decisions that you're going to regret later on. So back to the question, what have we done during periods of the lowest part of an economic curve that made a huge difference? Well, firstly, I think you've got to, and maybe we'll come back to this, but I think one of the things you've got to look at is cost control. And I think that this is a tricky one, because a lot of costs are embedded in a business, things like rent, for example, rates and so forth. Of course, we can talk about power costs and so forth. But definitely keeping an eye on costs is very important. What you don't want to do is to cut costs where the costs that you're cutting can have a negative impact on your business. In other words, and I said it already, look after your people, look after the people that will help you to steer through those choppy waters, come out the other end. Don't think in terms of cutting salaries or bonus plans, because that's the wrong thing to do. If anything, I'd be doing the diametric opposite. I'd be placing incentives to keep people very focused on pushing the business through these difficult times. I'd even be enhancing bonus programs rather than diminishing them during these periods, in order to help us to get to that next level. So be careful where you look at cost cutting, but there is definitely a need to look at costs. What works for you? What stopped working for you? Can you be smarter around things like tech? Can we find candidates by plumbing very enthusiastically and cleverly our candidate database? I talk to customers, my clients, who have got hundreds, certainly tens of thousands of candidates on their database. Why, can we diminish our spend on things like job boards, for example?
On that point, Paul, very quickly, on Monday, I was sat with a client and we worked out the cost of his database. He gave me his database number. We said if 40% was still live and looking for jobs on his average placement, what was that worth? And it was worth £58 million was his database. So we said if we went back to 1%, we said at 1%, what's 1% worth? And it was something like £1.5 million was 1% of that database if you place just 1% of the database. So it says there's a massive amount of money sat in that database. I interjected there, sorry.
But you make a great point. And I have had similar conversations. I've got clients with 100,000 candidates on their database. It's small percentages that make a big difference. So I've talked, and this is, one of the things I always bang on about endlessly, backfilling opportunities, because that one drives me to drink, literally. You talk to customers about how many placements did we make last year? Okay, what percentage of those people were in jobs before we placed them? 90% tends to be the answer. How many of those jobs did we try and get on board? How many did we backfill? And it's not great, generally speaking. So, there are opportunities to the question here. What difference? Look at the detail. Look at as you said, Howard, correctly, look at the value that sits in your business. We talk people, obviously. We talk customers, obviously. But have a look at things like, very seriously look at the database, your data, because the data is valuable to your business. Excuse me. And instead of continuing to spend a fortune on job boards and the like, look at what we have already accumulated. How do we get more bang for our bucks out of what we've spent years building? Because those are the things that I think can make a major difference to your business.
So let's Dave, what have you done?
the number of things, but the key thing that I kept going was, and Paul mentioned it, was incentives. And obviously many companies have annual incentives and they have half yearly incentives. I made it weekly incentives. Not at huge cost, because obviously cost control is important, as Paul said, but when people are, you're asking people to give extra effort for accelerated performance to see companies through what may be a little bit of a bumpy time, then let's try and do something that breeds a little bit more familiarity and trust and collegiate nature of recruitment. Let's try and do a monthly meal. We have lunch clubs, all those sort of things. But I made sure that the incentives were the things that came from the floor. So what did they want to do, rather than what did I want them to do? So I made sure that we were trying to do stuff that they liked. Was it bowling? Was it table tennis? Was it work? You all know there's hundreds of things you can do, but I just tried to shorten them. Let's do it weekly. Let's do it monthly. And you know what? Sometimes behind that is a whole load of admin, because you've got to measure the data and find out who's doing what. But it was just that sense of, come on, if we can do this, we're going to go out. And it wasn't all about, let's get 100 CVs out, or let's make 50 interviews, or let's do 3 placements. Sometimes it was just the atmosphere in the office. If it felt really good, let's do something at the end of the week. So I think incentivizing people to perform and just to spend some time together, I think is a really good thing.
So I think when I looked at this, and because I agree with exactly what both of you have said there, what I looked at was how I motivate and how I energize my staff. And so to me, it was about creating new sales offerings to my clients, then training and developing the staff to deliver those sales offerings, which meant that my marketing had to pick up. I kept marketing out to my clients. I kept marketing out to my candidates, but I was training and developing my staff and developing the products that we were selling to our clients and to our candidates. And we found that took a massive steal on those clients or those agencies that we were competing against that chose to do nothing or go backwards and just put their head in the sand, or just accepted it as average and we're just going to carry on until something changes. So we increased our sales offering and we increased our training to staff, and that had a huge effect on the people and the morale of the people, because they felt they had something to go out and sell to clients. Now, if you think about what happened during recession, during lockdown, when we went out and spoke to clients, it was all about how can we help them? What else can we add to them? What new things can we add? And that made us really accelerate away from, what lockdown created. And that happened for me in all the recessions that I was in. It was about how do I reinvigorate my clients to make them become more sticky? And that was to give them new sales. And that might mean just rebadging what you've done, redesigning it in a slightly different way. But it was all about marketing out to our candidates, to our clients. But that marketing was actually directly aimed at invigorating our sales force to sell more and produce more than our competition. And that's what I did when we got to that bottom of the curve. What do we do to accelerate away? We looked at how we challenged the rest of the marketplace in that. So it's interesting that we've all been through this on a number of times, and they say it's easy to lead a business during good times, but the true strength of a leader is how they react and lead a business during hard times. So as a leader, what would you instill in your business during hard times?
Firstly, I would say it's about upbeat positivity, can-do attitude. Nothing should bother. It may be, and we've talked about this in the past during the COVID period, where people understandably were very worried about the future. But, you have to give out, from an outward perspective, an absolute sense of complete positivity, total belief that everything's going to be fine. And importantly, huge energy. What you've just been talking about there, Howard, is very important, because you've got to be consistently innovative. Constantly looking at every element of your business and asking yourself and the people around you, and indeed your clients, what do we do to improve? How do we improve in every area of the business? And it's not about staying where we are. It's not about keeping everything as it is. It's about consistently questioning everything. Can this be improved? Can we change that? Would that look better this way? if we did this way, would that have a positive impact? So it's getting that energy, that questioning attitude, that very positive, upbeat feel to the business, and never, ever, ever at any stage expressing any form of doubt to anyone around you. It's all going to be great. And if you look at great leaders through history, they've had that amazing level of positivity. I am quite certain that all of them will have had huge doubts and worries and concerns, but none of those were ever expressed to the people they were leading. And that is exactly what great leaders do during hard times. They show tremendous qualities of positive attitude, positive belief, and people buy into that big time. Back to that level of security again. People need to feel secure. They don't want to look at leaders who are getting flaky, getting worried, expressing concerns and worries and anxieties. That's not a good place to be. It's very important, I think, and we've talked about this a lot, that leaders, managers have people they can speak to openly and honestly about their concerns and fears, but these are private conversations with mentors and experts and people they trust, and not to the people around them. We're all human and we all have those concerns, but you don't express them to the people around you. Instead, you come in every day with enormous energy. That's what's important.
Dave?
Yeah, I think 3 words are important for me. Respect, trust, and courage. The respect thing is about having respect for one another as a team, whether you've got an office of 3 or whether you've got an office of 103. Do each of your people have respect for one another so that they can encourage one another and help everybody get through whatever we're going through? That could be carrying on with excellent performance, that could be turning around slightly less than good performance. So I think having respect for one another is important. The trust thing is about, do your people trust you as the leader of the business? If you're leading this business, are you doing things that will make your people trust you? And I think that's really important. And the final one is the courage, and that's the courage to hold firm. You know, we're talking about the plan. It's the courage to believe in what you're doing. I'm now at risk of alienating our entire audience, so forgive me for saying this, but I'm a gooner. We're top of the league, and we have a phrase that goes through Arsenal that's been there for 3 years, which is trust the process. And many people have laughed over the past couple of years thinking, well, that process doesn't work. And now it's beginning to work. And I think, I say that in a kind of jokey way, but it is true for us as a business. Trust the process that you're going through. You know what to do. You can get guidance as to how to do it, but you know what to do, communicate it, build trust, show respect, and have that courage.
It's quite interesting, Dave. You mentioned Arsenal and 2 people instantly clicked off. I think from my side,
watch Sunday's game. That's why.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, what you're saying, the pair of you, is absolutely correct. And I'm going to push on top of that. What I found when times got hard, that discipline became the key thing that I was trying to drive. So if I had a disciplined thought about what I was going to do, then I'd think about what the process is that I could do that by. Therefore, I'd create a disciplined process. If I then created a disciplined process, I had to create disciplined action to make that process work. And so to me, it was about having that disciplined thought, disciplined process, and disciplined actions within my business, and make sure everyone's following those type of things. And that discipline allowed people to be a little bit innovative in their own thoughts and how they were doing that. But if they had a thought of how they could develop and how they could grow, then it was to deliver that thought, then deliver the process that would back that thought up, and then take action to make that thought actually come to fruition and actually make money from that thought. And so to me, it was becoming, as Paul said, innovative during that sort of period, and becoming sort of challenging the marketplace. And to me, that was about what it was all about. I wanted to become a challenger in the marketplace. I wanted to be doing things that were differently to other people in the marketplace and take the market on. And that, I thought, at the time, was the easiest time to take the market on, because when everyone's on a high, everyone's pushing. But as soon as it starts to get a little bit tight, lots of people back away from that because they're a little bit worried about what do they do, how do they invest. And I think having the discipline to go through all of that and keep to your guns is really important. But being a positive, etc., etc., is really important. So I think we've smashed a load of things out today about what we should be doing with that economic cycle and about sticking to your plan, and it's all about the person and how you develop the plan and stick to the plan. If you haven't got the plan, full stop, then how do you know you're going in the right direction? And that to me is the biggest thing when economic downturn happens. How do you know you're going in the right direction? There's nothing worse than standing still, because as you're standing still, you're actually going backwards because everyone else is going forwards from you. So that we've got to sort of work on that and how we push forward. So as I'm pushed on time, this is the last question. This is the last webinar that we're going to do on recession, but I'm sure these conversations are going to sort of go up more and more. And next week, we're going to start a new webinar series, but what we're going to focus on is more the team and the business and how we can do that. So next week, we're going to work on setting targets and goals. Are your team fit to perform? This year's not over yet. So how do we make sure we get beyond this year and into the future? What's acceptable growth? What our data should be telling us, etc. And what does the past tell us that could actually influence the future? So I think we now start to look at what we've said. We know we've got a window of time before true recession possibly hits. What are we going to do before that? And I think that's what we're going to cover in the next 4 weeks of what are we going to do in those sessions. So Dave, Paul, thank you very much for your input. Ladies and gents, thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated. Thanks for all your comments, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye everybody. Take care.
Have a good week, everybody. Thanks, Pedro.